DISOVERED, my grandpa's 7 words transformed the $113,000 wedding mistake into an amazing revelation. Jake leaned against the oak bar of the Rusty Nail, the weight of a world on his shoulders. As he poured a whiskey for an older regular, his mind spiraled back to the overflowing wedding binder his mother had left on his kitchen table. 12 pages filled with floral arrangements, lavish catering ideas, a venue that felt like a castle, all culminating in a staggering $113,000 price tag. How could something meant to celebrate love feel like a financial death sentence? The thought sparked an uneasy knot in his stomach, growing tighter with each passing moment. Jake? The bartender jolted back to the present at the sound of the question. You all right? The old man's voice was warm, but Jake could barely muster a smile. He had dreams of marrying Emily in a simple ceremony under the stars, surrounded by friends and family rather than the suffocating expectations set upon him. The mere idea of disappointing his mother while trying to protect his own vision felt like a betrayal, twisting a knife deep inside. He dived into the noise of the bar, letting the hum of conversation drown out his fears, yet each clink of glass only served to amplify the chaos in his mind. He wasn't just battling the mounting pressure of a wedding, he was fighting the crushing expectations that came from family lineage and insidious legacy that implied love was earned with extravagance. Through the haze, Jake felt torn between authenticity and a gilded image he never desired. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Even while serving drinks, Jake was wrestling with the truth. The whispers of societal norms echoed louder than the sizzling pans in the kitchen. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice, rich with wisdom, a voice cut short but still etched in Jake's perception. The old man had always believed love was precious precisely because it was simple. Jake's fingers itched to dig into the old cedar chest hidden away in the corner of his childhood home. It was a long shot, but perhaps it carried some remnants of that wisdom he so desperately needed. As he finally unlocked the box and fished out the letters, a shaking hand unfolded one crumpled note. Love is built on trust, not show. 7 words, so simple yet capable of shattering the illusions he had held on to. What had his life become, a performance in a play where he didn't even know his lines? With this revelation, an overwhelming wave of exhilaration and dread crashed over him. Would he stand by his convictions or succumb to the weight of expectations? In this moment, a sweat collected at the nape of his neck, heartbreak and anger intertwined within him. The time was now or never. Jake could feel the countdown thrumming in his heart. A choice loomed ahead. His resolve began to fracture, leaving him questioning the very foundation of his beliefs. How could he define love in a world built on lavish displays of wealth? The tension hung thick in the air, and Jake stood on the precipice, waiting for the next beat in his life to unfold. Jake stared blankly at the handwritten note, feeling the sharp edges of uncertainty claw at him. The words echoed in his mind like a drumbeat, amplifying the weight of the choices he had to make. Trust, love, simplicity, these concepts stood in stark contrast to the monstrosity of expectations he faced. Each decision felt loaded, as if every choice could lead to either liberation or heavy regret. He glanced up and surveyed the bar, a familiar scene now tinged with an urgency he had never felt before. Regulars shared smiles and laughter, each clink of their glasses an affirmation of the connections he envied. He was fighting for authenticity amidst a wave of superficiality, and yet he felt trapped in an invisible web spun by those he loved. I could just tell her, he murmured under his breath as he wiped the bar with a cloth. We don't need any of this. The vision of Emily, the twinkle in her eye, the warmth of her hand flooded his thoughts. He imagined her expression if he suggested a rustic wedding under the stars, completely free of the adornments his family deemed necessary. But what if she didn't agree? The fear of losing her was more potent than any fear of family backlash. Still, he sensed a spark within himself that yearned to challenge those boundaries. He noticed how his heart raced at the thought of defiance, a pulse of energy igniting his veins. The realization felt empowering. Perhaps this was the growth he had yearned for, standing up for what he believed in, even if it meant risking everything. After closing up the bar for the night, Jake drove towards Emily's apartment. Each turn brought him closer, yet his stomach churned with anxiety. What would he say? Would she understand? Ruminating on those questions turned his thoughts into a chaotic whirlpool. Pulling into the small parking lot, he caught a glimpse of her silhouette framed against the window. The softness of the light enveloped her, contrasting sharply with his mounting doubts. He took a deep breath, trying to draw strength from the facade of confidence he was desperately attempting to build. Through the glass, he could almost hear the laughter they shared over quiet dinners, the easy conversation that flowed between them. Jake stepped out of the car and approached her door, each step heavy with the potential consequences of his declaration. Just when he was about to raise his hand to knock, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. Ignoring the call, he took another breath, steeling himself for the forthcoming conversation. But the sensation of that persistent vibration made him reconsider. What if it was someone needing him? Against his better judgment, he checked the screen. It was his mother. An impulse struck him. Could this be a sign? He took the call, swiping to answer, and prepared himself for the inevitable tug-of-war between familial obligation and personal desire. Jake. I hope you're excited for the wedding plans. Her voice rang out with an exuberance that felt hollow against the background of his inner turmoil. Oh, Mom, he began slowly, his throat tightening. As he stood on the precipice of the conversation that could either shatter or reinforce the chains binding him, he felt the crack in his resolve deepen. Would he finally express his wish for a simple wedding, or would he retreat back into compliance? Finding his voice was becoming a battle of its own, yet he recognized he was fighting not just for himself but for Emily, too. The moment had come either to break free or remain shackled to expectations. How could he redefine love without taking a stand? He thought. But what if taking a stand meant losing what he cherished? There was no turning back. Jake, honey, his mother's voice cut through the tension like a knife. You're going to love it. Everything is coming together beautifully. The venue is stunning, and you won't believe the menu we picked out. Her enthusiasm felt like a crushing weight pressing down on him. Every word echoed the rigid expectations he fought against. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, as if seeking clarity amidst the fog of obligation. Mom, he finally managed, his voice shaky but rising from a newfound place of determination. I think we need to talk. Talk? About what? She sounded oblivious to the storm brewing in her son's heart. About the wedding, he said, searching for the right words. I think we need to rethink some things. Rethink? Jake, this is all done. You can't just change everything now. Her voice escalated, laced with disbelief. Your father will be so disappointed. The mention of his father sent a jolt through him, as if a current of fear had been unleashed. His father, the embodiment of tradition and expectation. The very man whose approval felt like an impenetrable fortress around Jake's heart. Mom, he pressed on, steeling himself against the rising tide of anxiety. It's not what I want. It's not what Emily wants either. A silence followed that felt like an eternity. He could almost hear her thoughts racing, calculating the implications. But this is what families do. She finally retorted. We put on a great show for the world, for our community. It's tradition. All at once, Jake felt the churning doubts of previous years swell within him. Tradition, expectation, approval, they were all strands of the web that had ensnared him for too long. Was this his life, just a performance under a spotlight that increasingly felt alien? No, Mom, he asserted, the conviction building within him. It's time for me to make my choices. I need to find my voice. This was not about impulse, this was about claiming his truth at last. Jake, I don't understand why you would want such a small wedding, she shot back, confusion morphing into impatience. We've spent months planning this. Do you really want to throw away our efforts and dreams? He could feel her disappointment piercing through the phone line, but Jake's heart was too resolute to waver. This was the moment to confront not only his mother but the limitations he'd placed on himself. What I want is to be authentic, he stated. If Emily and I decide on a small wedding, it's because that's what speaks to us. We want something meaningful, something that reflects who we are. He heard a soft sigh on the other end, a moment of contemplation, and in that pause, Jake felt a flicker of hope. The dynamic was shifting. Do you think you can talk to Emily about this? His mother asked, her tone softening but still laced with doubt. I need to talk to her first, but I believe we're on the same page about this. Okay, she relented, hesitating. But I'll always be here to support you, even if I don't fully agree. Before she could finish, Jake interjected, I really appreciate that, Mom. But this is where I find my strength. As he hung up, a warm mix of relief and anxiety coursed through him. He felt lighter, freer, though he knew this was merely a preliminary step. The battle was far from over. He turned towards Emily's apartment, taking a deep breath and recalling all the uncertain moments prior. He realized that battling the past was a process, not an event. Jake felt the shift within himself, the blurry image of who he was finally beginning to sharpen. With each step towards her door, he felt the grip of anxiety relax, replaced by a growing certainty. He had survived the first confrontation against tradition and found a piece of himself. Now all that was left was to share that with Emily and invite her to join him on this path. As he raised his hand to knock, a voice inside him echoed with renewed resolve. The moment had come to face the most crucial conversation yet. Before he could second-guess himself, he rapped his knuckles against the door. As he waited, he wondered, would he find common ground with Emily, or would this new chapter bring unforeseen complications? Emily opened the door almost immediately, her bright smile dropping slightly as she recognized the storm behind Jake's eyes. He felt exposed in that moment like a vulnerable new plant sprouting in harsh sunlight. Hey, Jake. You look intense, she observed, her tone gentle. Can we talk? He asked, stepping into the familiar comfort of her living room, yet feeling like a stranger in a house that was supposed to feel like home. Sure. What's going on? She said, leading him to the couch, her concern palpable. Jake settled in, deeply aware that this conversation could shift the course of their relationship. I just had a talk with my mom about the wedding, he began, the words struggling to break free as shadows of doubt whispered in his mind. What did she say? Emily's eyes narrowed slightly, a mix of curiosity and apprehension starting to reshape her expression. She's set on a big traditional wedding, all the fancy details. And, she seems to think I should just go along with it. You don't want that? Emily asked, probing gently, yet her own disappointment crept into her voice. I don't, Jake replied, his voice firm. I want something authentic, something that truly reflects us. I just told her that we should rethink everything. He could see the flicker of surprise in her eyes, which pivoted to understanding. Wait, you told her? Just like that? It felt right, he confessed, the weight of that moment crashing over him anew. I finally found a voice to express what I want. I can't keep letting tradition dictate my life. Emily studied his face, her gaze softening as she processed his words. I get that, she said quietly, her brow furrowing. But I'm still not sure what I want. A small wedding sounds appealing, but will our families understand? A knot tightened in Jake's stomach. That's what we need to figure out together. I want to invite you into this decision-making. How do you feel about it? Her response hung in the air, a tenuous balance between fear and the desire for freedom. With my family, it would be a huge deal to go against tradition. They have expectations like yours. What if this backfires on us? Jake leaned forward, tapping into the soft strength he had just discovered. Then we'll face it together. Our happiness has to come first, right? What do you want your wedding to say about us? Emily sighed, looking down as she wrung her hands. I want it to feel intimate, to feel real, but I also don't want to hurt my family's feelings, she admitted, her internal conflict echoing through the room. A time-worn thought crossed Jake's mind: tradition didn't equate to love, and love deserved a voice. Emily, what if we craft something beautiful out of this tension? Our wedding could symbolize a bridge between our lives before this moment and our future. We can honor our families while doing something meaningful for ourselves. Her eyes met his, vulnerability shining through. A bridge, that actually sounds right. But what do we do about our families? Jake sensed the shift in her tone, his heart racing. The possibility of crafting a new narrative felt like liberation. We could invite both families to be a part of the decision process. Maybe a small gathering that brings everyone together without the pressure of a full wedding? A day where everyone has a say, but at the end of the day, it's still ours. Emily smiled hesitantly. That could work, she breathed, her expression brightening. But only if we make it clear what is most important: our love. As their conversation blossomed, Jake felt a surge of optimism. The union of their visions began to take shape, moving them away from rigid conventions towards a space brimming with authenticity. "Let us set a meeting with our parents," Jake proposed, adrenaline coursing through him. "But what if they don't understand? What if they fight us on it?" she asked, the reality of their path pressing down again. A calm resolve enveloped Jake. "Then we'll adapt. Because in this conversation, we're defining ourselves, and that power outweighs everything." With a new plan forming, excitement replaced Jake's earlier anxieties, the uncertainty of the future dancing on the horizon. They were not merely planning a wedding, they were sculpting their identities block by block, and he felt eager to take that leap with her. Yet, as the conversation neared its conclusion, a pressing question lingered uneasily in his mind: could this newfound purpose truly withstand the weight of their expectations? As they leaned closer to discuss the next steps, Jake remained on the precipice of their dilemma, realizing that their journey had just begun. Jake leaned back against the couch, the comfort of the cushion unable to quell the tension banding around his chest. As Emily voiced her concerns about their parents' potential reactions, he replayed his mother's words in his mind: tradition, expectations, commitment. Each term clawed at him, rooting him to a past he desperately wanted to escape. "Jake," Emily's voice pulled him back. "What if we meet with them first and talk about our ideas before making any firm decisions? Maybe they'll come around if they see how much this means to us." The calm of her suggestion was like a soothing balm, but Jake's unease bubbled just beneath. "But what if we're only prolonging the inevitable? What if they dig in their heels harder after hearing our thoughts?" The fear of confrontation brewed inside him more than just a family dispute. It was about the very identity he wished to forge with Emily. "But what's the alternative?" she countered, her conviction rising. "We can't run from them forever. This is our lives, our wedding." Those words sparked something deeper within Jake. It was as if a spotlight cast upon his fear, exposing it for the illusory wall it was. He realized this wasn't just about their wedding, but about establishing an enduring partnership steeped in honesty and mutual respect, one that could weather even the most turbulent familial storms. "Okay," he conceded, his voice steadying. "Let us meet. But we need to be prepared to stand our ground." Emily nodded, her affirmation igniting a sense of camaraderie. "Together," she echoed firmly, a shared commitment solidifying their connection. Just then, a wave of anxiety mingled with exhilaration coursed through him. The thought of voicing his desires publicly and aligning them so openly with Emily's was liberating yet fraught with potential backlash. Over the next few days, the weight of anticipation filled the air like the scent of rain-soaked earth before a summer storm. The arrangement was made for that weekend, a family dinner where they would attempt to paint a vision that blended their identities. As the date loomed closer, Jake's determination grew like a fierce wildfire, burning away remnants of doubt. In the ensuing hours, he turned to reflection, hacking away at the mental clutter that usually suffocated those fledgling thoughts of rebellion. He found himself revisiting conversations he'd had in the quiet comfort of Emily's living room, recalling how authentic voices can guide transformative change. Their budding relationship encapsulated everything he wanted: liberation from outdated conventions, a new identity unbound by expectations. That Saturday evening, the dining table stretched longer than usual, laden with family favorites, but Jake couldn't taste a single morsel. As guests arrived, he felt as if he were caught in a brilliant performance, draped in anticipation but unsure of his lines. Subtle glances exchanged between Emily and him only heightened his awareness of the stakes involved. They began the meal with small talk, pleasant yet superficial. Jake placed his napkin in his lap, feeling increasingly restless. Then, with a shared glance, they steeled themselves for the truth that awaited their parents. As they cleared their plates, Emily's hand sought his, a quiet promise of support amidst the rising tension. "Mom, Dad," Jake started, his voice cutting through the banter, "Emily and I want to talk to you about our wedding plans." Just as he voiced the words, he sensed the atmosphere shift, the air growing thick with unspent reactions. The world around him faded, leaving only the cadence of his heart pounding in his ears as he prepared to explode the bubble of tradition they had both been encased in for far too long. What would unfold next was uncertain, but as he grasped Emily's hand tighter, Jake couldn't shake the realization that they were about to unfurl their own narrative, one that would irreversibly shape their journey forward. The love they cultivated could be their anchor through the impending storm or the catalyst for something even greater. "Then let us talk about it," he breathed, his heart calm despite the turbulence, fully aware that this was more than a conversation, it was a defining moment of their shared life. Little did he know, the true challenge lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to unfold with every word they dared to speak. Would their families embrace the authenticity of their intentions, or would the shockwaves of resistance fracture the fragile foundation they worked to build? As the echoes of his voice faded, Jake's heart raced, every second stretching into eternity. The air hung thick, pregnant with the potential for conflict. He had braced himself for resistance, but the silence was almost deafening. His parents exchanged glances, it spoke louder than words. The unease settled like dust in a once vibrant room, smothering what should have been a celebration. His father, the embodiment of tradition, was the first to break the spell. "Jake, are you sure about this? A wedding it's not just a ceremony. It's a message. Your mother and I spent years planning for our children's futures." Jake felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. The dinner table, once a familial sanctuary, transformed into a battleground where ideals clashed. With Emily's hand firmly squeezing his, he steadied himself. "Dad, I understand what you're saying. But this is not just about following a script. It's about all of us, about what makes us happy." The initial shock morphed into a defensive posture, an instinctive reaction whenever change threatened to trespass upon long-held beliefs. Silence burgeoned, filling the gaps with unspoken criticisms and judgments. "Emily," his mother interjected, her voice sharp, "don't you think it's a little unorthodox? What about the family heritage? The vows passed down?" Jake felt Emily's grip tighten. He appreciated her resolve, but at that moment, he worried that all of their careful planning was unraveling. Yet he couldn't allow fear to dictate his voice once more. He turned to Emily, their eyes connecting in a silent reminder of their purpose. "We realize it's unorthodox. But we want our wedding to reflect who we are together. We both want to build a new tradition, one that's rooted in our values and beliefs," he asserted, feeling an unfamiliar surge of confidence. The tension at the table thickened like fog, but it also gave rise to an awakening within Jake. The confrontation felt like peeling back layers of scabbed scars, revealing raw flesh beneath. This was no longer merely about the wedding, it was about stepping into his own identity, centering his life around choices made by him, and not dictated by outside voices. He saw the flicker of intrigue in his father's eyes, a glimpse of potential understanding. "What do you mean by building new traditions?" his mother questioned, now less defensive, intrigued. Jake seized the moment, laying out their vision. He painted a picture of a wedding infused with personal significance, ceremonies that honored who they were as individuals while acknowledging the journey they shared. Each detail would narrate their love story, not just to follow the leader rehearsal of previous generations. He felt heard for the first time, giving weight to the realization that articulation of one's desires could forge understanding rather than distance. As he spoke, Jake noticed the familial tension morphing into collective contemplation. It was as though the walls of resistance were softening, evolving into a dialogue rather than a monologue of expectations. He could feel Emily's admiration alongside the growing acceptance in the room. And then, like a sudden gust of wind moving through a grove of trees, his grandfather piped up. "You know, I once faced a similar crossroads with your grandmother. Some of my choices met with disapproval, but ultimately, Jake, we shaped our lives together, building a family that represented our vision." His words were simple, but their impact was seismic. They anchored Jake. Those 7 words dismantled Jake's worries and fortified his determination. "Discover your own path," his grandfather continued, "and you will find a way for others to follow," a gentle smile breaking through. Jake inhaled deeply, the tension in his body easing, replaced by budding excitement. The evening's exchange had spilled into an uncharted territory, a place filled with hope and possibility. More than mere acceptance, he sensed an invitation for transformation, a chance to rewrite family narratives. "Maybe," his father muttered, more to himself than anyone. "Maybe we have been a little too rigid." It was a glimmer of validation, a crack forming in the shield of expectation. As the conversation unfolded, they explored alternatives, providing Jake and Emily the sense of agency they yearned for. But profound changes often unveil new challenges. And as family discussions shifted, Jake realized that the complexities of love and identity held secrets he hadn't fully confronted. What deeper revelations awaited as they navigated this transition? Why did change seem to come with its own set of burdens, tightly wound with the desires for acceptance and love? Jake sensed the answers loomed just within reach and prepared himself for the reflections yet to come. Would new traditions be embraced, or would old habits prevail, casting shadows on their hopes? Jake's heart swelled with an intoxicating mix of hope and anxiety as he attempted to reconcile his family's expectations with his own desires. A shift had occurred, something quietly potent had sparked in the tension-filled air. He glanced at Emily, who wore a tentative smile, her eyes glistening with pride. In that fleeting moment, he understood that their confidence was a paradox. It wasn't just about stating their intentions, but backing it up with unwavering resolve. The next few days morphed into a whirlwind of meetings and discussions. Jake found himself reviewing wedding venues, brainstorming unconventional ideas, and even recruiting friends to help bring their vision to fruition. Each step was a venture into the unknown, a labyrinth fashioned from their dreams. But deep within, another battle brewed, a nagging certainty that the looming shadows of familial expectations had not entirely receded. He had taken the first steps away from the old ways, but what about his parents' lingering doubts? What if their grudging acceptance wasn't sincere, but merely a facade to mask their discomfort? These questions rattled around in his mind, feeding his insecurities. He needed their support wholeheartedly, and as the wedding date approached, he felt an insatiable urge to broach the topic again. At lunch the next weekend, Jake cleared his throat, the familiar constriction of anxiety creeping in as he fixed his gaze on his parents. "I think I need to talk about how we can make this work for all of us." He could taste the vulnerability in his words, each syllable pressed between the forks and knives on the table. His mother set down her glass, eyes narrowing, already bracing for a rebuttal. "What do you mean, Jake? We've talked about this. You and Emily are making the decisions." "Not entirely, Mom. I want us to make this a family affair. I know I've pushed for a new tradition, but it still feels isolating. You'll always be my parents, and our family values matter to me. How can we include both our vision and the heritage you cherish?" As Jake articulated his need for collaboration, he harnessed an unexpected power, the capacity to mold the very fabric of the situation with the threads of honest dialogue. He noticed his father's brow furrow as he fished for a response, the internal struggle obvious upon his face. Perhaps Jake was leading them into unknown territory, yet with every word he spoke, he sensed the faith that he could navigate it. After a quiet moment, his father finally replied, "I appreciate that you want us to be part of it, but we don't quite understand your vision entirely, Jake. Give us the specifics." Jake nearly faltered but then held firm in his resolve. He shared his ideas about personal vows, unique rituals, and the crafting of a ceremony that symbolized their journey. Slowly, as he spoke, he witnessed the transformation of his mother's apprehension into intrigue. "Those sounds lovely, actually," she admitted, a flicker of realization lighting her eyes. "I never thought about incorporating your identities. It could be a beautiful balance." Encouraged, Jake pressed further, presenting an initiative for his parents to share relatable experiences, their own unique stories and traditions that shaped who they were. What better way to intersect continuity with innovation? Each tale would serve not only as a connective tissue between generations but also as an anchor for his vision. With each suggestion, Jake felt a burgeoning sense of empowerment. By inviting their participation, he was not rejecting his heritage, he was acknowledging its importance while crafting a new chapter. But as enthusiasm built, a gnawing question clawed at him: would they fully embrace this blending of past and present, or would the shadows of entrenched traditions ultimately swallow his attempts for authenticity? Jake sensed even deeper revelations awaited, ones that might test not just his ability to negotiate family dynamics, but his very understanding of belonging. As the conversation flowed, he realized he had not just had an idea, but a transformative opportunity, a way forward that challenged the very axis of their existences. Yet amidst the excitement, a riveting uncertainty loomed over him like a thundercloud waiting to unleash its storm. The moment of truth was approaching, and Jake understood that proposing a new way of being might require weightier sacrifices than he had foreseen. Would this be the breakthrough he hoped for, or would he find himself stepping into another battleground where the past threatened to derail their inaugural steps toward unity? Jake's heart raced as he flicked through the details he'd meticulously arranged for the wedding. The bright blue and silver theme was meant to symbolize the intertwining of their lives. Yet, the lingering echo of his parents' skepticism echoed in his mind like a dissonant chord. Their hesitant support troubled him, leaving him to question the depth of their acceptance. Was he truly rooted in the past, or had he germinated something new that could withstand family scrutiny? As he plastered his initial ideas onto the planning board, his phone buzzed, snapping him from his reverie. It was Emily, asking to meet. The message was simple, but Jake could sense the weight behind it. He felt a jolt of urgency. Maybe it was time for him to lean into the discomfort and face these shadows head-on. They met at a local cafe, a cozy spot where sunlight poured in affirmatively through the windows. But as he approached Emily, he noticed a furrow in her brow. He took a seat, instinctively rearranging his thoughts for clarity. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady, "while your parents seem to be on board with some of the ideas, I worry about the mixed messages. They like the changes, but their hesitation still feels palpable." Jake inhaled sharply. "I know. I felt it during dinner. But what can we do? This isn't just a wedding, it's the foundation of our life together. I want it to represent both our paths. And what if we flip this?" She proposed, her eyes sparking with an idea. "Instead of waiting for them to come around, let us reach out to your grandparents. They can help us create a bridge between your family traditions and ours. They loved you, and they might see the beauty in what we're trying to do." Skepticism bubbled within him. Could his grandparents truly reshape this narrative, or would they simply mirror his parents' reservations? Despite the seed of doubt, a flicker of hope ignited. "Why not? My grandfather used to tell me stories about how weddings in the old days focused more on uniting families than strictly adhering to customs." The idea began to take root, bringing along a sense of empowerment. Jake pulled his notebook from his bag, and as they sketched ideas of ceremonial elements that blended both heritages, he felt a budding purpose reinvigorating him. The more he envisioned, the less tethered he felt to his fears. He realized that to create a new tradition, they had to first acknowledge the old. He sensed Emily's enthusiasm, the connection sparking between them as they brainstormed. Each flourish of creativity diminished the weight of expectation laid by his parents. Yet, somewhere within, a doubt simmered: was it right to revolve their identities around the approval of family? Shouldn't this be about them first, without the shadows looming in the background? The next day, with trepidation, Jake decided to confront the fear that had held him back for far too long. His fingers trembled as he dialed his grandfather's number. When the voice on the other end answered, it was cloaked in familiarity, warmth mixed with authority. "Grandpa," he began, stammering through his anxiety, "I need to talk about the wedding." As he proceeded to explain the vision he and Emily had crafted, Jake felt the ground shift beneath him. For the first time, he could articulate their desires without the heavy weights of expectation imposed by his parents. Several affirming stories later, his grandfather said something simple yet powerful. "Jake, weddings are less about the rules we follow and more about the love that binds us. Always remember that." A wave of relief washed over him, and for the first time, he felt grounded in his own independence. Perhaps this venture into family dynamics didn't need to be a battlefield, it could be a landscape for exploration and reinforcement of their identities together. As he hung up the phone, a thought punched through his mind: what if by marrying these traditions, they uncovered something unexpected? Something precious about both families that transcended their individual skepticism? But with every transformation, Jake knew a reckoning lurked around the corner, a confrontation that could unearth unresolved familial tensions. Would that new revelation be a victory or a potential landmine waiting to explode? Jake's newfound conviction propelled him into action, transforming his anxious reluctance into focused determination. He spent the next few days immersed in planning, meticulously weaving together elements from both families into the wedding narrative. Edits to the guest list and venue options flew around like confetti, each decision feeling more meaningful than the last. Still, he couldn't shake the thrumming tension that lingered. It surged within him during quiet moments, shadows of past conversations with his parents haunting each step forward. Were the changes enough to satisfy them, or would the effort only deepen the chasm? With each late night spent drafting invitations and crafting a wedding agenda, Jake confronted an unsettling thought that began to emerge from the corners of his mind. Was he merely reshaping details to placate his parents? The drive to honor both family heritages felt noble, but he kept returning to one pivotal worry: what if his vision for their wedding dimmed under the weight of others' expectations? The following Saturday, energized by a mix of apprehension and resolve, he invited Emily to review his revisions. As the early afternoon sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the scattered wedding paraphernalia before them, she arrived with a sparkle in her eyes that drew him in. "Jake, I love this directive," she said, pointing to a draft of their ceremony script where he'd included tales from both families. "But I wonder if there's a way to amplify your voice in it." His stomach twisted slightly. "You mean talk about my journey? My struggles with family dynamics?" "Exactly." Emily leaned closer, excitement palpable between them. "Show them how you've grown. It's not just about tradition, it's about love, the way we want to build our life together, and how we're both navigating the fears that are surfacing." Internal conflict roiled within him as he scrambled for words. What if sharing that makes us more vulnerable? What if it freaks them out? It might. Emily softened, her gaze steady. "But think about it, the goal is connection. Family dynamics evolve, and maybe your truth can inspire them to reevaluate their own perspectives." Jake exhaled, wrestling with the prospect of laying bare the insecurities that had long plagued him. His heart quickened as he pondered the depths he'd have to dive to uncover those layers. Yet, the thought of fostering authentic love, the true essence of their union, flashed like a beacon. With a steadying breath, he committed to the concept and began outlining the segments he would include: his thoughts on identity, the intertwined narratives that set the stage for what it meant to be part of an evolving family. As they crafted word after word, a realization crystallized in Jake's mind: by embracing vulnerability, he wasn't dismissing his family's concerns, but rather including them in a story that encompassed their shared history and his quest for growth. That evening, layered in a newfound sense of purpose, he portioned out time to talk with his parents again. Inside him, the familiar fears churned, but this time there was something else, a determined whisper that urged him to let his voice resonate in harmony with the voices of his ancestors. Would his revelations be met with understanding from his parents, or would they trigger the very conflict he hoped to avoid? As he picked up the phone to call his mother, Jake felt the electricity of anticipation pulse through him. The rush was tangible, it underscored a shift that spurred his heart to race anew. He needed to prepare for the culmination of his personal struggles and professional development, aware that the next conversation could either fracture or fortify their familial bonds. The moment of truth seemed to loom larger with every passing second. Jake stood at the precipice of change, his heart racing with anticipation. The previous conversations with his family had laid the groundwork, but today felt significant. Today he would unveil not just a wedding plan, but a testament to his personal journey and development. As he entered his parents' house, the familiar sense of home wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. He felt an exhilarating mix of nerves and determination, each step resonating with the strength of his newfound identity. Seating himself at the dining table, he glanced at his mother, who was setting down a plate. Her smile was warm, yet he sensed the storm of expectation swirling just beneath the surface. "Jake. We're so glad you're here," she said, though Jake caught the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "How are the wedding plans coming?" "Actually, I want to talk about that," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the guidelines of vulnerability coursing through him. His father sat, the mask of casualness slipping as he noticed Jake's serious demeanor. "What is it?" he prompted, a hint of concern creeping into his tone. Jake inhaled deeply, the gravity of the moment weighing on his chest. "I've been thinking about our wedding plans and, more importantly, about what it represents, not just for us but for our families as well." He felt the tension rise, apprehensive eyes focused on him like spotlights. "Emily and I want to craft a ceremony that reflects our love and our choices. But we also want to honor our family traditions." An uneasy silence enveloped the room. "That's all well and good," his mother interjected, her brow furrowing, "but you must understand that traditions are important. They uphold our values." "I realize that," Jake continued, harnessing his newfound conviction. "But I also believe that love flourishes in authenticity, not just in ritual." Just then, he recalled his grandfather's wisdom. This wasn't merely about following a script, it was about embracing the essence of love itself. "Mom, Dad," he asserted, his tone firm yet compassionate, "Emily and I don't just want a wedding. We want to start our life together on the right foundation, a foundation of trust, understanding, and genuine connection." His mother's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding playing across her features. "But what if your choices hurt family feelings?" she asked, her voice softer now. Jake felt the stirring of a wave of empathy. It was clear that his parents had spent their lives nurturing traditions that held significance to them, but he needed to make them understand that their son was evolving. He was building his own narrative. "By sharing our journey, our struggles, and our definition of love, I hope to build a bridge between our past and our future," he explained. "I want to create a wedding that reflects who we are as a couple, and invites you both into that journey with us." As his words hung in the air, he saw the barriers slowly dissolving. He did not need to dismantle his heritage but rather weave it into a rich tapestry of both history and evolution. The tension softened, the walls around their beliefs began to bend, not break, but adapt. "Jake," his father finally spoke, looking thoughtful. "If this is truly about building a foundation for your future, then I suppose we need to consider how to merge our values with your desires." Jake's heart soared at the notion of compromise, yet his instinct reminded him that placing their desires at the forefront remained essential. The air shifted once more, and it filled him with the courage to go on. "Can we involve our families in the process? Create space for their stories while embracing our own?" His parents exchanged uneasy glances, but he pressed on, his excitement infectious. "Let us collaborate. We can create something beautiful together, something that represents both our pasts while setting a new course for the future." "I see the love between you and Emily," his mom finally remarked. "And as your mother, I only want you both to be happy. I'll give it my best effort." Jake's spirits surged, but he held back the impulse to celebrate prematurely, understanding that this process would require patience and continued dialogue. He was on a transformative journey, and each step drew him closer to not only a wedding but a life founded on authenticity. In the weeks that followed, the collaborative efforts to create their wedding intertwined their family's traditions with their identities. They shared family stories over dinners, capturing the richness of both heritages in a way that honored the past while stepping toward the future, fulfilling his desire for authenticity without alienation. On the day of the wedding, standing before the gathering of family and friends under the starlit sky, Jake beamed with pride. Each element of the ceremony resonated with a tale of beautiful merging of Emily's childhood memories with those of his own. The laughter, the anecdotes, and the heartfelt vows encapsulated their journey and growth, illustrating how their love transcended expectations. As Jake slipped the ring onto Emily's finger, he felt a surge of triumph, not just in the beautiful moment, but in the realization of every sweaty palm, every fear confronted, and each step taken towards the authentic self he now embodied. This wasn't merely a wedding, it was a testament to his breakthrough, a culmination of the journey from expectation to realization. He had conquered the shadows of his past with the strength of his voice, paving the way for a future defined not by tradition but by love and commitment. In that moment, as they took their first steps together, Jake understood the profound power that comes from defining oneself. It was a lesson learned, a legacy to carry forth in their marriage, and a beacon guiding them into the unknown horizons ahead. This is how one man achieved not only a love-filled wedding but an unequivocal personal victory that shaped a lasting testament to the journey of authenticity and the strength of embracing one's true self. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.